Good morning, Gamecock fans. It's another terrible Tuesday. Today is July 29th, 2025, the year of our Lord, or the year of our Lord 2025. And this is Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Thank you for joining me today. Not a terribly long episode. Gonna get in, get out. Tuesdays are always interesting because it's the worst day of the week, except for tacos. And by the way, shameless plug for one of our sponsors, Taco Tuesday at D's Wings in West Columbia tonight if you're down living in the capital city. Always love to plug D's because I like D's. It's easy when we have sponsors on the Chief Sports Network that I like. I like all of them, all of the businesses that support us. Um, Shane Beamer had birdies with Beamer yesterday. Kind of an uneventful press conference with him. Just basically touched on some things like Jeff Collins and Rahsul Faison, which continues to linger. It didn't really have an injury report or a summer workout report because the staff is meeting, I believe, today. But there'll be media days at the end of the week for the local media, and I think you'll have more information at that point in time. He said the coaching staff was at a clinic in Greenville, and it's the high school coaches clinic that always kind of takes place up there. It's a lot of fun from what I hear. That'd be something I would go to if I were around. I've been a couple of times, and all the high school coaches get together, college coaches, stuff like that. It's a good event. And so they were kind of just getting back, and but still some noteworthy things that were discussed. He talked about he's going to get this question about 178 times from various media people about facing Virginia Tech in Atlanta. That's kind of the main subject today, is playing in Atlanta and in this game and scheduling and all that. Playing his alma mater. I know that Beamer has a lot of pride. Obviously, his last name's Beamer. It's the program that his dad built, and there's a statue of him outside of the stadium. He took that program, Frank Beamer did, to new heights. Frank Beamer himself is an alum of Virginia Tech, so a lot of Hokies ties there. Frank Beamer also said he kind of was given Shane Beamer, the same spiel he's giving everybody else. I just hope it's a well played game. And he's like, well, wait a minute. You're sitting in the Gamecock section, and that's kind of been the talk, kind of a minor storyline that you'll probably hear a lot about as well. Is Frank Beamer, what will he wear, Hokie gear or Gamecock gear? I would imagine probably some neutral color that's a shade of somewhere between garnet and maroon, or like a color that's off the grid, maybe a nice white shirt, something like that. Because it's got to be tough. I mean, it's not just like, oh, I coach there. It's in many ways synonymous with their lives. Frank and Cheryl Beamer, Shane's parents, and Shane too. That program obviously means a lot to them. They're honoring Frank and Cheryl Beamer on the field before the game, according to Gary Stoken, who used to be called the Peach Bowl Committee. Now it's Atlanta Kickoff Sports whatever association. They put on these games, the Aflac kickoffs and the Peach Bowl and all that good stuff. He's been there forever, but so they're going to honor him. I'm sure both sides will give a nice round of applause. Because Frank Beamer is a good guy, too, in addition to being a Hall of Fame coach and the father of South Carolina's head coach. I mean, he's a guy that's done some really great things, nobody really talks about besides winning football games through his life. So hats off to them. But Beamer did address that. Shane Beamer did yesterday. And I think that's going to be asked. He said, I'll be glad when it's over. And it's probably not so much coaching against his alma mater, though. There are mixed emotions. I think Steve Spurrier said it after he beat Florida for the first time. I got mixed emotions because he's a big old Gator, but it's part of the job, and they do it. And I think when you look, Will Muschamp coached against Georgia his entire career. Spurrier played Florida every single season. Back in the day, Jim Carlin had a run against Georgia Tech. I mean, it happens. I mean, Pat Dooley, Pat Dye, who was the head coach at Auburn for years, legendary coach down there, Georgia grad, and Vince Dooley, we know who he is, Georgia legend, is an Auburn grad. So how about that? And that's the oldest rivalry in the South. They absolutely play every single year. So this type of thing happens in college football. It is an interesting storyline, and people are going to ask about it. But he was asked about it again, and I'm sure it'll come up again and again and again because you have different reporters that come to these things, and national folks sneak in there, and they're going to ask and have an angle and all that good stuff. But the Faison thing, I'll touch on that and Geoff Collins, and then we'll get to it. I don't know. A lot of us, myself, Whittle, I know some other folks were told kind of behind the scenes last week before last, that it was coming to a head and looked good. And now it's just, whatever the waiting game is, there's speculation. I've speculated about this, that the NCAA is maybe trying to sandbag it. In other words, just run out the clock, and then if he tries to go to court, you're still going to miss some games, which I think would be very petty and sick. Honestly, I mean, I don't think that the NCAA should be making decisions that directly impact the lives of human beings, other student athletes, one way or the other. If it's a no, just say it's a no, and then Rahsul and his folks can kind of figure out the next steps, whether that's trying to get an NFL training camp, or whether that's suing and trying to get an injunction, which, that's not a given. I would think that with Faison's, situation, a judge would rule in his favor, but it's not a given. The NCAA has been winning these eligibility cases, by and large, and so they lost one the other day to this seventh-year Nevada receiver who's crazy enough, now in the portal and may go to UCLA. I don't know. We'll probably get into some of that with on the show, because Nico had I read some of his comments from media days at UCLA or whatever, and I'm like, that guy doesn't get it at all. It's kind of a meme. Oh, well, Ohio State's really gonna look to get me. They wanted to beat me bad. I'm like, me? I think Ohio State, by and large, was just fired up to play an SEC team that brought, I don't know, 20,000 fans, and was openly talking about taking over their stadium at night at the Horseshoe. I don't think they gave a damn about Nico. I mean, he didn't really make a difference in that game anyway. So we'll talk about that on the show a little later. But, the eligibility cases have not necessarily been going the way of the player, so to speak, with the exception of that one Nevada kid who may end up at UCLA with Nico. So, it's a mixed bag. But, in order to make a decision like that, because some people will say, well, why don't you just sue them right now? Well, because they haven't made a decision. It's like, they're kind of stringing it out. And what if the decision is yes, which obviously there's been some really good feedback about it. And, so what if the decision is yes, and you go and sue, and then, you've wasted time and money doing that. And, there's no really reason for the lawsuit. And, it's just one of those things. And nobody has gone and preemptively, by the way, for those on Team Sue right now, because there are some out there that believe that, because I think the fans are a little more impatient about it than for Rahsul Faison. It's for those that are on team, go ahead and sue them. Well, number one, you don't really have a case until they say no. And then, number two, there's not a single one of these cases that they've brought and won or lost where the NCAA is not ruled on it. And so, I mean, you gotta kind of wait for the final decision. And it's a little more complex behind the scenes. Not the eligibility part of it, like not the, well, he didn't really play football. It has to do with the clock and what happened at Marshall early in his college life, and really it's unfortunate. Marshall University should really, because my understanding is he's not the only one this happened to, but if my information is correct, and I'm not going to get into the details, Marshall University should have put a screeching halt to those practices back in the day. And I didn't look up who the coach was at the time, but it's you know there's a reason a lot of kids that didn't have grades ended up going to Marshall, and I'll just leave it at that. And what happened to many of them through the years, we don't even know. So, well, I'll leave it at that as far as Marshall's concerned. I used to really be a Marshall fan. I had a good friend that I worked for actually early in my newspaper days. He was three things. His name was Mickey. Loved that guy. He's a Vietnam vet. He's a huge liberal, you know. Uh, and this was during '03, '04. I remember him talking about John Kerry a lot. Uh, and he was a huge Marshall fan. In addition to being a good boss in the newspaper business, taught me a lot of like, quote unquote real journalism. It's not real journalism anymore, but back in the day. So I don't know where he's at, what he's doing. The paper got bought out, and he ended up going to Pensacola, that was owned by Gannett, which owns you. We were owned by Gannett. USA Today is Gainesville Times, and then some rinky-dink company. And I was out of there and on to rivals.com within 6 months once they bought it out. But they came in and fired him and basically hired a community liaison to replace him that didn't know much journalism. Nice lady, but not much journalism. And that place became a hellhole quick. But he went to Pensacola, lost touch with him. Don't even know where he's at or what he's up to. But he was a Marshall fan, and I always liked Marshall. The movie We Are Marshall. Randy Moss played there. Didn't like it when they beat the Gamecocks in 1998. Had another shot at them back in 2018, and the game got canceled because of hurricane, and Carolina ended up playing Akron at the end that year. But it was one of those things where, I didn't have a problem with them. Well, then last year they ran off their coach. And then, they still had like 49, 50 players, enough to go play. They back out of the Independence Bowl. Oh, we're not going to play. And I thought that was a punk move because they're the ones that ran off their coach and sent him packing to Southern Miss. And, now I find all this out. So maybe this school in West Virginia isn't what I thought it was. So anyway, there's my little Marshall rant for this morning. I know you guys love that, but it's it's just one of those things where this Faison thing probably could have been handled better a long time ago. How about that? Geoff Collins, I failed to mention this, also has ties to Clayton White. Actually hired Clayton White up at Western Carolina. Mad Dog Mullinax's alma mater. Go Catamounts. And they coached together there. He also knows Torian Gray from Florida. He knows Derek Moore from Georgia Tech, George Wynn from Florida. So a lot more connections to the Gamecocks coaching staff than just Shane Beamer, who he was a graduate assistant with at Tech back in the day. Beamer did mention he's going to get into recruiting, and he is a relentlessly good recruiter. Geoff Collins is. So particularly in the Atlanta area, and because he's from Atlanta, I believe he's from Conyers. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So playing this game in Atlanta, when you ask Gamecock fans, all of you out there, it's kind of like the discussion about what uniforms look better as far as the scheduling philosophy goes. And this matters now because obviously last year's playoff committee didn't care about strength of schedule. And in their eyes, 10 wins was better than 9 no matter what. Like I'll throw Indiana. I've talked about Indiana enough and all these other schools. I'll throw them out of it and just put, let's say Tennessee against South Carolina. Let's include the Gamecocks because the Gamecocks showed. Dang it. So, what's the difference between Tennessee and South Carolina? South Carolina has a lot of quality wins. Tennessee's got one against Alabama. Tennessee looked like the best team in the country first 3 weeks of the season, and then didn't really score a whole lot. Good defense. Um, the difference is South Carolina played Ole Miss at home, and Tennessee played Mississippi State, and South Carolina lost to Ole Miss. That's the difference. You know, you could probably granularly break it down and say, well, they beat Alabama and Carolina didn't, and Alabama's one of the teams among the discussion. But, common opponents, Carolina beat the common opponents they had with Tennessee a lot worse. You know, Tennessee did not have to play Ole Miss. They did not have to play LSU. They did not have to play Texas A&M. They did play Alabama and Georgia, but lost badly to the Dogs. Tennessee lost to Arkansas. South Carolina didn't have a loss like that on their schedule. Arkansas was a 6-6 football team, and so there was no discussion of that. So if you're thinking about like, well, this is always how it's going to be, which I don't personally think it will. I think there's been enough griping from a lot of big programs that, hey, look, this cannot stand. You have to adopt some strength of scheduling metrics here because even with the program or the teams you're picking from the conference, there's a discussion that's not even being had with these rankings and stuff. But if you look at 10 wins better than 9, you're like, the crowd that does not like scheduling anybody, and some of them want to drop Clemson, which is never happening. They don't schedule anybody that could possibly beat the Gamecocks outside of the conference. Which I mean, I don't know that you're wrong. And I think a lot of recent events, including in 2023, that team goes to a bowl if they play the Sisters of the Poor instead of opening against North Carolina and Charlotte. 2019, they were behind the 8 ball, even with a big win at Georgia, and the season eventually went south because the freshman quarterback and the team got worn down or whatever. But anyway, that team, had they beaten Kentucky and Georgia and had that win over North Carolina, which they were up 20-9 and blew it. Mac Brown's first game back at North Carolina is an unbelievable game. And then Bentley gets hurt, whatever. That was a bad day. Bad day. And that team's probably, after they beat Georgia, that team's probably a little more confident. The bowl's in reach, that kind of thing. Losing to Tennessee by 4 points at home, and as bad as the 2020 season was, that one goes the other way. And Carolina's 3-1 after 4 games, in that season. So I get it. And everybody remembers the Texas A&M opener in 2014. I wanted to get in that. But the bottom line is this, though: Carolina's like 21-4 this century in openers, but 3-3 since 2019. Carolina has not always played a bye game or a cream puff or a cupcake or whatever you want to talk about in openers. Group of 5 FCS school. They've played NC State in openers. They've played North Carolina in openers. They played Vanderbilt, Mississippi State through the years. It's not just been. I mean, they've been successful. Most of the time openers for Carolina, it's two things are usually true. Carolina usually wins, and Carolina normally doesn't play that well. It's usually a sloppy game. So, and if you ask me right now, Virginia Tech game, I think Carolina will win. I think there'll be some anxious moments. I think there'll be, as there always are after openers, a lot of questions, a lot of areas for improvement. Don't know if I'll stick to that or not. We'll see how things unfold as we move along. But so there's that crowd that does they don't want to play. They're convinced now after the playoff thing last year, and in the North Carolina game 2 years ago, that's the way to go. And look, who am I to say you're dead wrong? You could be right. That's not where I personally come down on it. But hey, that's a scheduling philosophy. The problem with getting out of some of these games they've scheduled is, with committees and things like that, you don't want to do something where like you're the only school to say, all right, we're going to schedule like Kentucky from now on. because they would be. If South Carolina starts getting out of some of these games, they definitely would be. And there are some scheduled in the future. The other crowd, and this was a vocal crowd when these games started being scheduled, however many years ago, 6, 7, 10. And I will say something about that too. Why do we schedule games so far in advance in college football? There's no strategic reason to, I mean, there's no strategery on this, right? It's like you're scheduling games. So, like, all right, so South Carolina plays Virginia Tech this year in Atlanta. They played them again in 10 years, 2034 and 2035. Nobody knows what's going to be going on then. I mean, even before college football started changing like this rapidly, there were all, I mean, think about how different things were at South Carolina in '05 versus 15. That's the entire Spurrier era. And these Virginia Tech games have been on the books for years. In 2034, I don't get it. Is it because athletic directors want to do it? Is it because you're worried about filling out the schedule and it's kind of get what you can get? I think it's ridiculous. I mean, we set conference schedules 12, 18 months in advance. So I don't know what there's logistics, that have to be done. I understand it's a little different traveling a football traveling party than because of the number of people than everything else. But man, I'm just like, dude, that's I don't know why that happens. I mean, it's just there's nothing about football that takes place other than, these are two good programs. We're gonna match them up way down the road. I don't know. I have no idea. I speculated yesterday maybe it's because they're like prizes for athletic directors. And I'm not criticizing Rick Tanner or anything like that, but there was a vocal portion of the fan base that wanted, number one, they didn't want to play in Charlotte anymore, which, look, I think it's run its course, to be honest. Not saying they'll never play in Charlotte again. I think, you know, uh, I think playing, if they played NC State up there again, that would be fine. If you played like a West Virginia up there, somebody different, that would be cool. Notre Dame in Charlotte, I think, would be pretty sweet. Uh, the Mayo Classic for I think a couple of years from now is Notre Dame and Wake Forest in Charlotte. Something like that. But this play in North Carolina up there and all that, it's run its course for now. So number one, they wanted some home and homes. That was kind of the feel of the fan base at the time. And then number two, they wanted to, you know, play, not have cupcakes. And so this is the other portion of the fan base. They don't like sitting through three games against, Tom, Dick, and Harry State University every year. Especially when it's at home. Because that's three times you're going to drag out there and watch the Gamecocks beat up or struggle with, some team that doesn't really get your juices flowing. And ultimately, fundamentally, it's an entertainment product, and everybody wants wins. I mean, I don't think anybody's talking about like, I mean, there's some that want 12 SEC games or whatever, but that's kind of a fringe. Most folks are happy with, on the side of the schedule is fine. Want Clemson. They want another ACC type team or a team that's, I mean, all the games scheduled are ACC opponents. And then two teams you should beat, and then the SEC, as long as it's at 8 games. The 9 game conversation changes things, I think, for a lot of folks. So there's that side of it, and I think, whoever's right and wrong, it just kind of depends on how the playoff evolves and, some other stuff. But look, SEC teams aren't buying out of games. Big Ten teams are, right? Indiana, Nebraska balled out of a Tennessee game. But they're stuck on this nine's better than 8 thing. And I think a lot of this, if you look at the committee, a lot of Big Ten influence from on the committee last year. Your 9 is better than 8, that kind of math thing. And I just don't, I don't think that's how sports works. You know, if you're a Major League Baseball team and you have 27 games against the Colorado Rockies and you're 25-2, and an opponent is 18-7, against the Los Angeles Dodgers, although in the standings, that 25 wins or whatever is going to count more. And Major League Baseball's balanced schedule, all that good stuff. But, you know, you're not going to look at if you're making a binary choice between which is the better accomplishment. You're probably going to say the team that went 18-7 against the Dodgers. That's just sports, man. Who you play matters. Um, so I think it depends on how the playoff evolves. I think it depends on the 9-game SEC deal, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon. You know, I, so you look at it, and that's going to kind of determine, the crowd that wanted them to schedule more games. Because if you have 9 games in the SEC, that's different because it's another game that everybody gets up for, no matter who you play these days. Or number two, I don't think anybody's going to sit there and, you know, I believe they would sit through 3 games against Cupcakes if it meant playoff or not. That's just because that's a whole different universe of awesomeness. Um, as far as playing in Atlanta goes, because there were some that thought they should just get out of this Virginia Tech game and, schedule Delaware State or somebody, and I mean, this year, right? And some of that thought comes from it's a window of opportunity with Lenore Sellers and all that. And I agree, it's a window of opportunity. That doesn't mean it's going to be the window of opportunity because we thought, a lot of folks that wanted to fire Shane Beamer after the 2023 season thought that, that a window of opportunity was Spencer Rattler and that was lost forever. And then here comes Lenore Sellers. So that's why you just keep recruiting, keep rocking and rolling. Who knows? Landon Duckworth may be special. Aaron Nolan. Lenore Sellers is a great player. Probably one of the best I've ever seen. Could go down as the greatest of all time. There's no question. But the program's going to be here regardless. And people are going to be trying to win at South Carolina regardless. Um, so, that kind of comes from all that. Cancel the Atlanta game. Well, here's why you don't. Number one, Atlanta it's a different animal than Charlotte altogether. Atlanta's kind of the capital of college football. Mike Morgan says it all the time. It's the mecca of college football, the capital of college football. The old national championships there. The Hall of Fame is there. SEC Media Days circulates through there. It is as college football of a city as there is. It is not. College football runs that city. No offense. The Braves are immensely popular, obviously. The other sport, Falcons, Falcons have a lot of fans, but you ask most people around Atlanta, is Saturdays or Sundays more special? It's definitely Saturdays. Large Georgia contingent, every program in the SEC has huge alumni bases. Florida State, schools like that from the ACC. I mean, it's a big city. And so it's college football, man. I mean, it is. It's special. It's special. The SEC championship game being there is special. Special playing in the Georgia Dome. South Carolina hadn't played there very much for whatever reason. I always kind of found it curious when you had Steve Spurrier, Lou Holtz, and all this excitement, and you're right down I-20 that, programs like Duke were getting invites to this game, and South Carolina wasn't. But Ray Tanner and his staff worked on it during the Will Muschamp era. And it was one of those things they finally got. And, it was scheduled before Beamer got there, but announced after he did. And so playing Virginia Tech 2021, I think 2021, something like that. So 5 years in advance, Gamecocks finally got in the game. And so that's it. Playing in Atlanta is good. From a recruiting and exposure standpoint, both in Atlanta, and because look, it's good to drive around the ATL with your car flags on and people see the fans and stuff like that because every other school's done it. Tennessee, there's going to be a lot of orange coming down I-75 for that opener with Syracuse. So it's good exposure for your brand, and branding matters in college football locally, with Atlanta. South Carolina's in town. Gamecocks have only played there a handful of times, and a lot of it's been when they've played Georgia Tech. They've only been in the Peach Bowl twice. Ironically, those were the 2 times They got their 1.5 conference champs, the division champions in 2010, played in the Peach Bowl against Florida State and lost. And in 69, the ACC championship team lost to West Virginia. And I think that game was at Georgia Tech. I think that wasn't at Fulton County Stadium yet. Bobby Bowden was the OC at West Virginia. And Jim Carlin, who would go on to coach the Gamecocks, was the head coach against Paul Dietzel's Gamecocks back in 69. And then that's it. As far as, SEC championship game in 2010, Peach Bowl in 2010, neutral site Atlanta games are 0-3 in the modern era. Back in the day, I don't know. They used to play, let's go to the park and play, college, excuse me, play college football at the field of the YMCA. But, so it's good for your brand to be exposed in that market. And, it's just everything from seeing fans out to seeing the support and all that good stuff. Number two, it's a chance for a chunk of your roster to play in their hometown from the Atlanta metropolitan statistical area. South Carolina has 12 players, 12 scholarship guys. That's 14% of the roster. If you're counting 77, if you count 85, it's about 12. So there's a chunk of guys. Kobe Saki Prize, a freshman defensive end from Roswell. Jatavius Shivers is from Villa Rica. Casey Henry's from Marietta. Jared Brown's from Parkview High in Lilburn. Demola Ajadon is from Duluth. Christian Ingram, another freshman from Conyers. Air Noland is from College Park. Vakari Swain's from Carrollton. AJ Holloway is from Powerhouse Buford. Boaz Stanley's from North Oconee. Trevon Ball is from Atlanta Pace Academy. And Troy Pikes, who came in from the portals from Atlanta Mays. So there's a lot of great players in South Carolina that have come out of the Atlanta area. Flowery Branch, where Connor Shaw came from, is part of the Atlanta Metro. It's up there, Hall County, Gainesville, where I used to work. I talked about earlier, but it's Atlanta. Connor Shaw. Recently, JJ Enigbare was an Atlanta guy that got drafted. Carolina's always gotten players. George Rogers from Duluth. One of the greatest players of all time at the University of South Carolina. So, despite the lack of playing over there, Carolina, has played a lot in Athens, but you've got a pretty good group. You continue to recruit over there, and so that's important for players to play in their hometown. They're going to be very excited about going down there and playing. It's a big stage too, nationally. I talked about local recruiting nationally, because the TV window is exclusive. Everybody's going to watch a lot of football all Labor Day weekend. And guess what? 3:00 on Sunday, everybody in the country's tuning in to watch Lenora Sellers and the Gamecocks play. Sellers has a lot to do with that, because you look at the clips, everybody's special. Everybody loves a great player that does amazing things. But there's no NFL football on that weekend. Obviously, it's Labor Day, and you got the exclusive TV window. There's no other team playing a college football, and outside of a bowl, that hasn't really happened too often at South Carolina. So the opener is showcased, and those games get great ratings. Everybody's fired up to watch them. So that's important too. It's on ESPN, not ABC, so the number's not going to be as big as if it was ABC, but it's going to still be big. And everybody around the country, they get to see Mercedes-Benz Stadium packed with Gamecock fans, neutral site game. Shoot. The other part of it's financial, $6 million payout. Money's important these days, folks. This isn't like, for the naysayers that didn't want to schedule the game, this isn't like Georgia Tech moving the daggum Georgia game to Mercedes-Benz for money. That's just asking for a 50-50 split when it's already 50-50 at Grant Field, right? That's egregious. It'd be like South Carolina moving the Clemson game to Charlotte. Oh, we're going to play it at Bank of America. Then you're just going to increase Clemson's crowd. This is not that. This is an opportunity to go down and make some cash and all the other benefits that come with it. If it was just a payday, I would probably say, I don't know. But I think it's a good deal. Playing Virginia Tech is a good deal, even without the Beamer angle. Again, the Gamecocks, for those of us that started kind of following it closely in the 80s, Gen Xers, this is a series that the game that was played every year from 86 to 91. Gamecocks won 4, lost 0, and tied. There were ties in college football once upon a time, too. Frank Beamer was the coach of Virginia Tech in 5 of those. So maybe the seeds were planted for Shane Beamer back in there. And, then Virginia Tech and South Carolina, they've played a lot in basketball. Play again this year. I think the last 2 years they've played in basketball. Gamecocks have won both, but Carolina, Virginia Tech used to be in the Metro, and they play every single season, home and home. The days of Bimbo Coles and the Virginia Tech Hokie basketball program. So I think it's a good deal. I think that I'm excited. I'm going to the game. I've waited for Carolina to play in this kickoff, one of these kickoff games for a long time. I like, I'm with the people that said Charlotte kind of ran its course. I was at the North Carolina game, and it wasn't really because of the outcome. It was just, hey, they got a big crowd in here. Half of it's baby blue, half of it's 60% of it's garnet and black, 40% is baby blue. This was the atmosphere you were looking for. All right, let's go ahead and play home and home. Because it's kind of cool going up to Chapel Hill and them coming here. But Atlanta is different. Like I said, Atlanta's a different animal. And then, starting in the next couple of years, there's other non-Clemson Power 5 scheduled up 2020. Next year's Miami. The next year Carolina goes to Miami, then North Carolina in 28-29, and then NC State in 30-31. And those are all home and homes. Chapel Hill, Raleigh, Lauderdale Lakes, Hard Rock Stadium, wherever you talk about it. You want to talk about a fun road trip. That'll be kind of cool. So anyway, no matter where you stand on this, if you think the Gamecocks should not be playing these games or if you think they should, drop us a comment in the comment section. I'm back on a hiatus of reading the comments, but you can all discuss amongst yourself. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and tell your friends about coffee and all the programming we have on the Chief Sports Network. John Strickland is on the morning show this morning, Mike Morgan co-hosting. Phil and I will be along right after that. Don't forget Sports Talk tonight from 6 to 8 on the Chief Sports app. This has been Coffee with JC Shurburtt. I'm out. Holla.